They thought they were doing me a favor by showing up at my door that Sunday morning. My mother-in-law had her church clothes on, her reading glasses pushed up on her head like a crown, and a manila envelope in her hand like she was serving me papers. In a way, I guess she was. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already moved every single dollar out of that account 4 days earlier. And I hadn't said a word. I need to back up, because if I just tell you what happened that morning, you'll think I'm some kind of cold-hearted person. I'm not. Or maybe I am now. I don't know. What I do know is that I spent 3 years being the warmest, most accommodating daughter-in-law anyone could ask for, and it got me nowhere except staring at a bank account that was $118,000 lighter than it should have been. My name is Lenora. I'm 34 years old. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, and I work long hours for decent money in a mid-sized city in Ohio. My husband at the time, was named Garrett. No, wait. I'm going to call him what my therapist calls him. She calls him the decision. As in, the worst one I ever made. I met the decision at 27, married him at 29, started trying to understand why I felt like a guest in my own marriage by 31. By 33, I understood completely. His mother, I'll call her Mother Cecile because that's what she made me call her from day one, and even now the name sits funny in my mouth, was a retired bookkeeper from Columbus. She presented herself as practical, no-nonsense, deeply fair. She used the word fair constantly. It's only fair, Lenora. The fair thing to do. Any fair person would agree. I have learned in the years since that people who say fair that much are usually running a con. His sister, I'll call her Prism, because she had a way of bending every conversation until the light hit in a direction that benefited her. Prism was 38, twice divorced, living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Dayton that she could barely afford, and absolutely convinced that the universe owed her something spectacular. She had 2 kids, a mountain of consumer debt, and a charm offensive that could light up a room when she needed something from you. The decision himself, my husband, was somewhere in the middle, not evil enough to have planned any of this, I think. Just weakened to go along with it. Here's what you need to understand about the account. When my grandmother passed away, she left me $85,000. That money came from her whole life. From the house she'd sold after my grandfather died, from decades of careful saving, from birthday checks she wrote herself reminders to send. I cried for 3 days straight when I got that check, not because of the amount, because of what it meant. She had thought of me. After everything, I wanted to use it toward a house. My husband had a small amount saved too, maybe $33,000 from a settlement he'd received years before. Combined, we were looking at enough for a solid down payment in our market, with some left over as an emergency buffer. We opened a joint savings account. This is the part people always ask about. Why would you put it in a joint account? Because I was married. Because I trusted him. Because I was, at that point in my life, a person who still believed that marriage meant something. The account had both our names on it. Only our names, that matters. What I didn't know, what I found out 14 months later when I happened to look at the mailing address on our bank statement, was that Mother Cecile had been added as a secondary account holder. Not by me. I had never signed anything. I had never been told. When I asked my husband about it, he said his mother had suggested it for emergencies, that it was just a precaution, and that he hadn't thought it was a big deal. He said it so casually, with so little concern, that I actually sat there for a moment wondering if I was overreacting. I was not overreacting. The dream they had for that money was not a house for us. I found this out in pieces. A comment here, a glance there. Prism had started talking about wanting to move to a better school district for her kids. Mother Cecile had mentioned twice that the apartment lease was ending in March. My husband had been coming home quieter than usual, the way he got when he'd been having conversations with his family that he hadn't told me about yet. It came to a head at Thanksgiving. We drove to Columbus for the holiday. Dinner was fine on the surface, sweet potato casserole, too much pie, a football game that nobody was really watching. Then after dinner, when I expected everyone to drift toward the living room, Mother Cecile set down her coffee cup and said, "I think we should talk about the future." I thought she meant retirement planning. Her retirement, something adjacent to me. She did not mean that. She had a whole presentation. Not literally, no PowerPoint, but she had thought this through. Prism needed to move. The school her kids were in had been struggling. There was a house available in a suburb of Columbus. A good neighborhood, a good school. She'd already looked at it. The asking price was $310,000. With a 20% down payment, that was $60,000. They were proposing that I contribute $62,000 from our savings to help Prism buy this house. You two don't need to buy right now, Mother Cecile said, looking at me with the particular gentleness that people use when they've already made a decision and they want you to feel good about agreeing to it. You're stable, you rent a lovely place. Prism's children need stability too. I sat there for a moment. That money, I said slowly, came from my grandmother, and your grandmother would have wanted it used for family, Mother Cecile said. Wouldn't she? My husband was looking at the tablecloth. No, I said, she left it to me. For a house, for our house. Prism made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. This small exhale that managed to communicate about 11 different forms of contempt. Then she said, I just think it's interesting how some people have so much and still can't bring themselves to help. I drove home from Columbus that night in silence. My husband fell asleep in the passenger seat. I kept both hands on the wheel and did not cry until I was in the driveway. January is when things moved fast. I had started seeing a therapist in December, not because of the Thanksgiving confrontation, but because I had started having the kind of Sunday afternoons where I sat in my car in the Target parking lot for 40 minutes without going inside, and I thought that probably meant something. My therapist, Dr. Osi, is a small, precise woman who does not believe in meandering. By our third session, she had asked me to write down everything I knew about our finances and bring it to her. I did. And when I looked at everything written out on paper, the account, the secondary holder, the amount, the proposal, she looked at it quietly and then looked at me and said, What is your plan? I didn't have one yet, but I started building one. I called a family law attorney the next week. Not a divorce attorney. Not yet, I told myself, even though somewhere I already knew. Just a family law attorney to understand what my rights were. Her name was Ms. Abernathy. And she was the kind of person who communicates through very calm, very precise sentences that somehow leave you feeling both informed and slightly terrified. She told me that as a joint account holder, my husband had the legal right to add another signatory without my consent, depending on how the account was structured. She told me that in Ohio, marital assets are subject to equitable distribution in a divorce, but that separate property, like an inheritance, can sometimes be traced and protected if proper documentation exists. Do you have documentation? She asked. Showing the source of the funds, I did. My grandmother's estate attorney had sent a full accounting. I had kept it in a file folder in my home office, between our tax returns, where nobody had ever thought to look. Then, Ms. Abernathy said, let's talk about next steps. I moved the money on a Wednesday. Not all of it. I didn't want to trigger any alerts that would get back to my husband before I was ready. I opened a new account, solely in my name, at a different bank. I transferred $118,000, which was my $85,000 inheritance, plus the portion of interest and cost contributions that I could document as mine. I left his $33,000 and the small amount of joint savings in the original account untouched. I told no one. I went to work on Thursday and treated 4 kids with sensory processing challenges and ate my lunch at my desk and went home and made pasta for dinner and watched television and did not say a single word about any of it. I had learned, finally, to be quiet when it counted. That Sunday, 4 days later, Mother Cecile arrived at our door with Prism, and behind them, a man I didn't immediately recognize who turned out to be Prism's boyfriend, a guy named Thad who apparently had opinions about property investment and wasn't shy about sharing them. My husband had known they were coming. Of course he had. He told me that morning in the tone he used when he'd already decided something and needed me to simply receive the information. Mom wants to talk through the house thing, he said. Just listen, Lenora. Just hear them out. Mother Cecile sat down at our kitchen table and produced the manila envelope. Inside was a printout, a listing for the house in Columbus, the breakdown of costs, and what appeared to be a draft agreement, handwritten, showing a $62,000 family loan from our joint account to Prism. She pushed it across the table toward me. We'd like to move forward, she said. The sellers have accepted an offer contingent on financing. We need the funds transferred by end of next week. I looked at the paper. I looked at my husband. He was looking at the table again. I have a question, I said. Of course, Mother Cecile said. Have you looked at the account recently? She frowned. What do you mean? The joint account, I said. The one you were added to. Have you checked the balance? A pause. Prism looked at her mother. Thad shifted in his chair. I don't see why that's relevant, Mother Cecile said. It's relevant, I said, because the money isn't there. The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. Not peaceful. The kind that happens when a room full of people all realize simultaneously that the ground is different than they thought it was. My husband's head came up slowly. What do you mean it's not there? I mean, I moved it. You moved it. He said it. The way you repeat something back when you're trying to decide if you heard correctly. My inheritance, which I can document down to the dollar from my grandmother's estate, is in a separate account in my name. I've been in contact with a family law attorney. She's advised me about how separate property works in Ohio and what documentation I need to protect it. Mother Cecile's expression went through several phases very quickly. I watched them move across her face like weather, disbelief, then calculation, then something harder. You can't just take money out of a joint account, she said. Actually, I said, I can. It's a joint account. Either hold or can withdraw. That's also why you were able to be added to it without my signature, incidentally. That cuts both ways. Prism stood up. I had expected this. This is unbelievable. We're family. We came to you because we needed help, and you came to me, I said, with a draft agreement to take $62,000 from my dead grandmother's savings to fund your real estate purchase. You didn't ask. You drafted an agreement? With what? I asked. I wasn't angry when I said it. I was genuinely curious. With what? Income. Over what timeline? Secured by what? Prism didn't have an answer. Thad looked at his phone. Mother Cecile pressed her lips together. My husband said my name once, very quietly. I've also spoken to a mediator, I continued. I'd like to talk about our marriage separately in that setting. But I want to be clear today, with everyone present, my grandmother's money is not available for this purpose. It was not contributed to this marriage as a family resource. I have documentation. My attorney has documentation. And the account you were added to as a secondary holder no longer contains those funds. Mother Cecile picked up the manila envelope. She tapped it once against the table, a sharp little knock, like she was calling a meeting to order one final time. Then she put it back in her bag. I hope, she said, standing up, that you understand what you're doing to this family. I understand exactly what I'm doing, I said. I'm protecting what my grandmother left me. They left. Thad went first, which I respected at least for its honesty. Prism followed, and she did not look at me when she walked past. Mother Cecile paused at the door. Your grandmother would be disappointed, she said. It was meant to land like a blow. I had thought about this possibility, that someone would invoke my grandmother, that they would try to use her against me. So I had prepared for it. Not a comeback, not an argument, just the truth. My grandmother, I said, spent her whole life making sure nobody could take anything from her. She built that money quietly, over decades, and she gave it to me, specifically. I think she'd understand. Mother Cecile left. My husband and I stood in the kitchen for a long time after they were gone. He said he hadn't known I'd moved the money. I told him I knew. He said he thought we were going to work things out. I told him I thought so too, for a long time. He asked what happened. I thought about Thanksgiving. I thought about the tablecloth he'd been staring at. I thought about the account with his mother's name on it, which he'd never mentioned. I thought about the Sunday afternoons in the Target parking lot. You let them treat my grandmother's money like a community fund, I said, and you didn't tell me. You just let it happen. And waited to see if I'd go along. He didn't have anything to say to that, which was, in a way, the most honest thing he'd done in months. We separated in March. The divorce was finalized the following November. Ms. Abernathy was right about the inheritance being traceable. It was returned to me in full as separate property. The joint marital assets, such as they were split equitably. I bought a house that spring. A 3-bedroom in a neighborhood I love, with a yard that needs work and a kitchen that gets morning light. I paid 22% down. I had enough left over for an emergency fund, a new couch, and a week in Colorado with my sister, who had been telling me for 2 years that I deserved better and was very gracious about not saying, I told you so. She only said it once. I told her she'd earned it. Prism did not get the house in Columbus. The sellers moved on. Last I heard, she found a rental in a different suburb. I don't know and I don't ask. Mother Cecile sends a Christmas card to my old address every year. My former neighbor texted me a photo of the last one. It had a Bible verse about forgiveness on it. I thought about what to do with that information for about 30 seconds, and then I moved on with my day. My grandmother's name was Dorothy. She worked as a hotel housekeeper for 22 years and never once complained about it, at least not in front of me. She kept a separate savings account her entire married life. Not secret, she told my grandfather about it, but separate always in her name. Because she said you never knew what life was going to ask of you, and you needed to be able to answer. I keep a framed photo of her on the bookshelf in my new living room. Every time I walk past it, I think she knew. She always knew.